There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Australia's best independent news and opinion radio show, The Daily Australian, with Nicola Charles and Jason Olbourne.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Australian for this Friday, June 27th, episode 121, and 2 becomes 3. This is going to be a quite different show for you today as I introduce you firstly to my co-partner-in-chief, her name Nicola Charles. Nicola, welcome back. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, everyone. Very excited to chat to our guest today, Jason.
Terrific. Well, as you can see right there, that is the young and inspiring, the good-looking Michael Arbon. How about that for an introduction? Doesn't get that every day. Michael is a man from finance. He is a man who ran as a candidate in the 2022 election, and he works in Parliament House for Senator Ralph Babet. And we are going to hold him maybe to the fire. But I tell you what, by the end of this, if you don't believe, like I do, that Michael should be in office and making the calls at least out of South Australia or more, I don't know what's wrong. Either that or Michael's had a bad day. Welcome to the Daily Australian, or welcome back, in fact.
Jason, I thought it was only mainstream media that lied, but thank you for that kind introduction, and I'm happy to play third wheel today.
Good on you. It's terrific to see you. And this is the thing that we are going to find out in real time, that we have to do things a little bit differently when it comes to, at least the last 2 election cycles. Start reviewing what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and be able to move ahead and work out how it is that we are going to take back the powers that be in Canberra and start making common sense again. But it just seems like you have to fall flat on your face. You have to literally have it done to you in so many different ways that there's no other way but change before it happens. It's the strangest thing, politics. It's like you have to move a mountain, you have to fall on your face before you can achieve change. Is it always like that, or are we just in a really strange sort of period in history, Michael?
I think it's probably always been like that, but more so now because politics has become that career for a lot of people. It's, they study politics at uni, they study law, they study arts, they become a staffer, and then they wait their time until they become a politician. We don't have people going into politics benevolently wanting to give back to society. We have people going there to take and to achieve that career for life. And that doesn't create good outcomes, as you know, but it does make it hard for people of conviction to get a foot in the door as well.
That is so true, isn't it, Nicola? We certainly can attest to that situation. The people that we've spoken to, Matt Camanzuli ran a very prominent campaign out there in northwestern Sydney, and it still only achieved 10% in that election, despite a big swing away from Chris Bowen, who hasn't done a whole lot for working people and is trying to sell this whole green energy thing, which we'll get into in a moment. Michael, you put together some really fascinating information out of South Australia just about the illogicality, if that's a word, of how green energy is meant to be better for us, but it doesn't deliver anywhere. And so politics is so hard to create change. And then you have to wonder, well, how do you actually affect it? Is it a runaway train? Or is it a case of that you have to, join City Hall to try and change City Hall? They're the things that we might get stuck into today, because as much as you want to be an idealist in politics, you just can't seem to break away when people aren't interested in the first place. Nicola, how hard is it when you're talking to people out there in the mainstream to sort of, get overall change? You can change one person's idea on things, but then it just comes unstuck. People want to fall back to what they know. How do we deal with it in real time?
I think there's a devastating truth for me, particularly in Australian politics, where Michael spoke about there aren't any, truly benevolent individuals seeking to get into politics. I do know a number of them, but it seems to be engineered in such a way that they actually never achieve office, which makes me really sad. And, I've actually only been aware of you, Michael, for the last couple of months, to be honest. And, I'm really impressed with your thought process and your transparency and your openness. And I think, part of being a politician is, as someone who came from the entertainment business, you're sort of like a director. You need to be a great communicator. And we have people who are so closed off. I don't think they're good communicators at all. And I would love to see, I know you've got your reasons for not running and being in office, but, it's almost the same as these people who are benevolent and can't achieve office. You are clearly someone who should be in office, and yet you're not there. We've got you in the background, which is great. But I would prefer someone like yourself who sort of, reeks of integrity, really. I don't want to, blow smoke up your ass too much, but you do smack of someone who integrity, which is, it's as rare as these adverse reaction these days, isn't it? This integrity stuff. No one seems to have it. And I just think it's a shame, because I think there's a whole bunch of people who really do love this country. And there's a whole bunch of us that would have been prepared to work for, just a livable wage to, change things and have an effect in Australia. And those people never seem to be able to achieve it. For instance, the gentleman you work for, I'm not super impressed, so far, let's say.
Big call there, Nicola.
Like it is, Nicola. Michael?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, look, working for Senator Babbitt, one thing I will say is that he is not scared to try and expand the Overton window, and he sees that as his mission. So Ralph, being a real estate guy, probably what he's best at is marketing. And you might have noticed that he tries really hard online to try and spread the truth. He's not your cookie cutter politician. He's not going to sit in estimates for hours on end, sit there and just grind away. That's not his thing. His thing is more about the big picture, the future, and trying to sort of encourage people to take interest in the bigger issues. And that's what he does. And obviously my methods are a little bit different to Ralph, and that's why I try and complement him well enough, with what I focus on. But you're absolutely right about there being very few people who end up making it into Parliament who have that conviction integrity that you need. And the reason is we have largely a two-party system still. That's the truth. And in order to make your way through a big party machine, there is a certain amount of biting your tongue, waiting for your time, and that sort of stuff that's involved. And if you're willing to bite your tongue along the way, once you get in, I think it's very easy to capture you, because you've actually had to not be your full self to get there. And it's going to be pretty easy for you to be captured once you get in there, because you've got in there by not being your full self. There is some weak points there, and they're going to capitalize on that, whether that be the lobbyists from Big Pharma or Big War, or whether it just be the bureaucrats who have been there forever. They'll find a way to make sure that you serve their agenda.
Terrible. It's
Wow.
devastating. It's devastating because really it's sort of like they are subverting democracy, because we get all excited that we have this opportunity to vote people in, whatever position, whether it's the Senate or the PM, and we believe we have that democracy in our hands. And then when these people get in, they stop working for the people who voted for them.
They start looking over their shoulder and wondering, oh man, what's my career after this? Maybe I should just play it safe. That is the human mindset that they have, because they're like, I quite like this job. I wouldn't mind doing this for a long time. And I saw that guy that got kicked out. I remember that guy, George Christensen or Corey Bernardi or Craig Kelly. There's a whole bunch of them. Russell Broadbent, they stuck their neck out and they paid the ultimate price. I don't want to be like them. Deep down, I kind of agree with them, but I don't want to take that extra step of really putting my head on the chopping block. That's too much. And I think there's a lot of people that are actually in Parliament who would agree with what you two talk about largely, but they're just too scared to really take that extra step of sticking their neck out.
That's it's such a sad state of affairs, isn't it? But such a reality. I remember interviewing Russell Broadbent, and I asked him what the solution was, and he said more politicians who are afraid to lose their seats, and there, of course, it is to seize power takes a massive amount of effort or a lot of luck. Or being part of the two-party system and being pre-selected to run in a safe seat are generally the ways that happens. But to win by fluke, of course, is a fluke. And in many cases, Ralph might even agree with that he was the only person to be elected from the UAP first time around and becomes, in a way, what I like to call a Mr. Smith going to Washington, that one person that gets in there by chance. So when people do seize power, therefore, they want to cling on to it, as hard as they possibly can. But of course, they compromise themselves in the process by not doing the work that they want to do. And so it's very, very frustrating. Now, we are here at the Daily Australian making, sort of new inroads in what we're trying to do. And as you said, Michael, and thank you for saying that people in Parliament House are indeed tuning in and having a look and maybe considering what we're saying. Part of what we're trying to do, of course, is to make independent media as professional as what the mainstream media deems itself to be. And we are very different to the mainstream media, the way that we analyse facts and news and draw opinion, etc. And that's why we are different from the mainstream news. And when you challenge the narrative, and this is such a big deal, you are going to come up against a system that wants to call your information misinformation or disinformation. And that is simply not true. There are only truth and lies, to quote Tucker Carlson. And if you want to call it misinformation or disinformation and not a lie, it means that the narrative is being challenged rather than the truth, or in fact, it is the truth the whole way. So as a consequence, what we're trying to do, as I said, become more professional. And subsequently, it means by doing that, we are also offering 20% off our annual plan to support us here at the Daily Australian, Nicola and myself. And our bestseller is our annual plan, which is normally $75, reduced to $60 until June 30. So that means that you can purchase today, Saturday, Sunday and Monday if you'd like to take advantage of that special offer there. And I really appreciate those that have and continue to support and realise that we are building something up here that we're very proud of, episode 121. So with that said, and the promotion about what's going on, Michael, I thought that for today's show, we're going to make it a little bit different. I want to run through a series of stories, some of which that you've posted on directly and some indirectly. But perhaps no more this week than we'll start with the E-Safety Commissioner, Julian Grant, this week spoke at the National Press Club, and she spoke for some time there. And here is on the ABC, 2.38 million subscribers, 133 people got to the end of that speech, if you can believe that. And here's the comment that I wrote on my X page: 133 people watching the ABC feed of the American woman from the land of the free speech stepping into Australian shores straight from the WEF to tell our kids up to age 16 who were mature enough to take a jab at age 12 of an experiment now deemed unsafe and not worth the risk of permanent heart damage to stave off cold symptoms. Well, they are too immature to watch YouTube Kids, but she and the government will become your kids' parents. And I said it's offensive, all of it. And it certainly got a bit of a reaction there. 2.7, there you go, 2,700 people liked it, and nearly 750 people reposted it. On that, and then going yesterday, we've seen this pop up on X. Check this out. E-Safety influenced changes. You can now report a post, and down the bottom, one of the things that you can report is that if it has illegal content in Australia. This form is provided to enable an Australian end user to report illegal content accessible in Australia. Where are we going when we have the dobbers on Twitter getting upset about something that is considered to be illegal in this country, Michael?
Well, illegal content in Australia, Jason, I'm assuming it's anything that the government doesn't agree with. That's sort of the way that we're going right now. And you see that in all sorts of legislation. The hate crimes bill passed earlier this year on a guillotine motion, and that included gender, sex, sexuality, all sorts of crazy things that were seen as being hateful and leading to serious penalties for people who might breach that for just saying maybe a biological truth or something. So look, we've got this under 16 social media ban that's coming in at the end of this year, December 2025, and it's a ban on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and likely YouTube if the Safety Commissioner gets her way. And I think it was 80% of teachers use YouTube as a content for their students in their classes. So I think Miss Inman Grant's once again overstepping her mark. But I look at Julie Inman Grant, and she's actually a really competent person. She has a very different worldview to you and I, but she's very good at what she does. I'm going to have to give her that. I don't agree with her, but she's very effective. She's very well connected, and we can't take her lightly. She is very powerful, not just in Australia, but across the world. And she's quite respected by people who have a different worldview, who think that government can fix problems like this, which they can't. It is a parent's job to police what their children have access to. We don't have Wi-Fi at home. I'm streaming from a hotspot at the moment because our kids don't have connected devices. They read books and they play outside. And I think that's going to make them more grounded humans. And my daughter reads a book every day. She's a freak. I can't read like she reads, but it's only by not having that option that she's now turned to books, right? But one other point before I talk for too long on this is a ban on people under 16 or children under 16 from accessing these tech platforms is not a ban on under 16s. It's a mandatory verification of identity and age for those who are 16 and over. That's truly what it is, because in order to work out whether someone is under 16, you don't have to work that out at all. They just can't access. You need to be able to verify the age of everyone 16 and over. And that's what this will end up being. And, it may be AI systems, it may be a digital ID, it may be a combination of that and facial recognition. We don't know how it's going to play out yet, but the bottom line is the government's going to have more data and the tech platforms are going to hold more personal data as well.
Again, none of it makes sense, does it? Because it's complete overreach in relation to how you would do that. Like, for example, if you have a blue tick on your X account, it means that you've had to fork out $100 or so on your credit card, which you can only get if you're an adult, to be able to do that. So that should circumvent that on X, so that if you have to do something else, therefore, you realise that there is an ulterior motive. That would be the first instance there, that would be the case. Meanwhile, on other social media platforms, there seems to be a complete double standard once again. And if you have to use your credit card to buy ads or do something like that, if you're a professional, that should get you past it. So where do we draw the line, therefore, when the opposition, who should be standing up to this and at the very least trying to make it as fair as possible, how do you put pressure on the Liberal/National coalition, if that's the case, to be able to say, well, listen, this is overreach. My job in the third party movement is to protect my constituents, and they should also be yours?
I do see an opportunity here. We know the coalition is largely in lockstep with Labor at the moment on this issue. You've got Alex Antic sitting on his own and maybe Matt Canavan, but you don't have much other support outside of those two at the moment on our side of the fence. But the misinformation and disinformation bill was a perfect example where people power actually worked. The Libs drafted that bill initially before the 2022 election. It was Paul Fletcher was the communications minister. They didn't table the misinfo bill, but they were preparing to do it. Labor then pushed ahead, and they got it through the House, but then the general public became aware of this issue. They become aware of the bill. And largely the problem in Parliament is not the fact that, these bills don't pass because they have large public support. They pass because they pass under the cover of darkness. They pass in the middle of the night. The average punter is not taking interest and the media is not covering these issues well enough. But any bill that gets decent media coverage usually ends up being heavily amended or killed, because the people understand that most of these bills are just solutions looking for a problem. There is no real problem they're seeking to solve. And if there is a problem, it is our individual responsibility to deal with it as parents. The government is not your daddy.
Correct.
Well, let me just say
Nicola.
that I wouldn't pay 1 cent, not 1 cent, for a blue tick or any kind of accreditation on a social media. I never have, I never will. I don't pay to promote. I don't do any of that stuff. As far as Australia is concerned, as a home, I mean, God, we're living in a country where Australians can't afford to buy a house in their own country. That's an absolute disgrace. So now what we've got with Julie Inman-Grant, the e-safety commissioner, misinformation and disinformation attempting to be put through, we've got a government here. You know, Australia for me is like an adopted child. I chose to raise my children here and come here. I paid a lot of money to do it because it costs a lot of money to come and live in Australia, or it used to. Now it seems, I don't know. I'm pretty sure the people coming in now aren't paying lots of money, not all of them anyway. So Australia is like an adopted child for me. And I adopted Australia to build a life here because I felt, having been born and raised in the UK and then living for 7 years in America, that Australia was the most progressive country on earth in a good way, not in a progressive left way, in a centre progressive way, in that you could be anything you wanted to be in Australia. Now I find I'm here with my children, and Australia has become a country that wants to decide what you do online, what you see online, what you post online, what car you drive, how far you can drive, whether you can own a home or even rent a home. So many things, your health, my goodness, that the government wants to control. I mean, I just find it extraordinary that in such a short amount of time, 5 years, and it was a surprise attack, Australia has done like a bait and switch. I'm not even sure these migrants that are coming to Australia now, as English is their second language, I'm not even sure they really understand what they're signing up for, to be honest. Because people overseas, and I've lived in many countries, they still see Australia as the Crocodile Dundee land, you know, throw another shrimp on the barbie. Right? Everyone's doing triathlons, having barbecues. It's always sunny and life's great and everyone's pretty much free. Now, I know they've had the footage going around the world since the pandemic of drones telling people to stop drinking champagne on Bondi Beach during lockdown and stuff like that. But I'm reasonably sure that these migrants, though they may be economic migrants, did not think that they were coming to a country that wanted to control their lives and their children's lives so much. I mean, you know, the curriculums that are going on in schools, the fact that they're going to give them credits for believing and running with the climate hoax is just extraordinary. And it all happened in 5 years, Michael. I don't understand how they've got away with it. And I don't understand the apathy of Australians. I don't. You know, when Dan Andrews said in Victoria in 2020, I was outside feeding birds, my house in Belgrave. When I heard on the radio that Dan Andrews was going to close the pubs, I burst out laughing and I thought, well, that's not going to work. This isn't going to last 5 seconds because people will be banging on the doors and demanding the pubs open. But they just all complied and they've all accepted everything that's come since. And I find it extraordinary. It's worrying for me that Australians, well, most of them, some of them are, but most of them weren't quite as tough as I thought they were, Michael.
No, and look, what comes to mind here is probably the failure of conservative politics. So the Liberal Party is the Liberal Party. It's got that word liberal. It's not a conservative party. And there's an essay that I'd urge you to read by F.A. Hayek. He was a philosopher from I think he was from the UK. And he wrote an essay called Why I'm Not a Conservative. And he pitched the differences between classic liberalism and conservatism. So conservatives have a habit, unfortunately, of just looking backwards and not really presenting a future progressive vision. Like you use that word progressive. Liberals, by their very nature, we are progressive, but we need to paint a vision and a hope for a better future that's not the future that Labor are presenting, that socialist future. We need to go against that and present a better future. Unfortunately, conservatism in Australia is just like, oh, we wish we went back to the 1980s. That doesn't inspire anyone and it's not going to happen. You need to present a future vision that's based on classic liberal values so that people have something to strive for to make Australia better. Like, what's wrong with saying that we need to ensure that housing is affordable for our children in 20 years' time, and here's how we're going to get there? There's none of that. We're playing short-term politics, and at worst, we're actually looking backwards, not forwards, and that's why we're failing.
Yeah. I think Australia needs a Conservative Party, a new one.
Well, we're going to talk about the political structure in a little while, probably as we get to the conclusion, as we look for solutions, whilst we delve with all the problems that are taking place. What I'd like to do now is we're going to move through a series of stories, and perhaps I think, well, look, this is just the complication of what's going on. I wanted to save some of the health stuff, but I think we'll get into it early. Michael, this is what caught my attention early in the week when you posted this particular story, and this was to reclaim, to go back in time, September of 2024, the COVID vaccine injury claim scheme just closed. I mean, it was always scheduled to do that, but it just seemed such an irresponsible thing to do. But then it was a way of covering tracks. And here you are explaining some devastating statistics where you say that nearly 5,000 people submitted claims. Less than 9% were paid or approved. 18 deaths were paid out. 40 million paid out. The biggest payout, $6.5 million, almost 11 months to get your money. And Pfizer, the one that didn't seem to cause any trouble according to the TGA, is responsible for 70% of said claims. Can you just go into a little bit of detail of how you put all that together? Is that publicly available, or did you really have to dig for it in the first instance?
This is one of the benefits of working with Senator Babbitt and having this access to Senate estimates. So this was a response to a Senate estimates question on notice. And now I'd urge people, if you do have a bit of spare time, jump on Google and look up Senate estimates questions on notice, and you can sort them by department, you can sort them by senator. We've put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions over the past 3 years. We've got some amazing information back, and that does aid us politically, but it aids the general public in being informed on what the bureaucrats are doing. So this response only came back 2 weeks ago. We've been seeking an update roughly every 6 months or so on this compensation scheme. It was a joke. It had a very narrow scope. It only paid out a handful of recognised conditions, even though we know there are hundreds of different adverse events that you can get from these novel products, and that is proven via the TGA database DAEN, where they report all the adverse events. But one thing I didn't mention in that post, which I think is relevant, I looked up the DAEN last night, and technically Australia's only acknowledged 14 deaths officially as being causally linked to these experimental jabs, but the compensation scheme's paid out 18. So the question is, who are those other 4? Because one authority is saying, hey, we've only got 14, and then the other one is saying 18. So we'll find that out in the next round of estimates, I'm sure. They probably won't, well, they won't identify because it's too small a number, but it will be important to work out whether the criteria is different as to confirming a death or not. And $6.5 million, I'm only going to speculate, but that is an awful lot of compensation. So that's someone that's either been permanently disabled, or it's the family of someone who was killed young in life. I don't know what it is, but that's a big amount of money to pay out. And maybe one of the most sickening thing is the fact that you'd wait 342 days for 91% of people to be told, sorry, we can't help you. That's the average wait time. So that's not just to approval, that's to decline as well. And it actually sickens me. We get calls and emails still all the time, and that's one of the benefits of our office is people feel safe contacting us for help. We can't help them a lot. We can listen to them, but there are people whose lives have been absolutely destroyed, who can never work again, and these are people who are not anti-vaxxers. They're people who took the vaccine, for goodness sake, who have been injured by it. They followed the government's advice. And I was actually lighting my fire last night, and I pulled out a Sunday Mail, which is a local paper from May in 2021, and I was going to burn it, but I didn't, because it had this 12-page lift out called Vaccination. And it was absolutely astounding going back in time and reading through that. And one of the reasons they told you to get the vaccines, or one of the benefits, was going to be your, what was the wording? I'm just going to look it up now. Status signifier. So it will boost your status within society if you take what they call a vaccine. I'm going to hold on to this because this is a good piece of propaganda to show the kids and grandkids in the future. But take a vaccine, boost your social status, and maybe you'll be able to go overseas one day. So, back in May 2021, it was a different world, wasn't it? So
yes, I've got one of those, Michael. I've got the Herald Sun from 21 as well, I think. And the headline across the front is Vax for Freedom. So you get your freedoms back if you vaccinate. And it was just absolutely disgusting. I mean, I don't like the way they rewrite history. That there's a clip, I won't go into it now, but there's a clip sitting second post down on my X account that I just posted before we came to air, where the US administration in America has wheeled out the military to sit and go through in a hearing in detail to explain to the American population, and I can't believe this is happening under Trump, but Jason and I can talk about that in our Unchained afterwards, where they're saying not a single death occurred in America from mRNA vaccination. So we know the Australian government has paid out at least 14 deaths, and we know that these are greatly underestimated. But for the military, and she's got all her medals on her jacket, to sit there and say not one death was caused by the jab. It really feels a lot to me, Michael, like we're living through a crime scene cover-up.
We are, but I think the silver lining is the fact that if you go back to May 2021, this conversation could never happen. This conversation is happening all over the place now, and that is a good thing. And we can't stop talking about it. I know we get sick of it, and I think the time has come to we're not outraged anymore. We're talking about it rationally, and we are professionalizing, and we're trying to make sure that we just don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And we've just signed up to the WHO pandemic agreement and the international health regulations as well. So, legislatively, we're signing up to more stuff, but I think the general population is far more happy to talk about this now than they were.
Well, let's give you two comparisons to sort of just juxtapose exactly where we are today. So here's a study protocol on the left saying that randomized controlled trials of behavioral nudges delivered through text messages to increase influenza and COVID-19 vaccines among pregnant women, study protocol. And on the right-hand side, just this week, a spike in fetal loss after COVID-19 vaccination in early pregnancy. Michael, how can we have two competing concepts right there about the exact same subject?
One great South Australian and another South Australian Chief Health Officer authored those pieces as well. So Marianne Damasi, amazing journalist, ex-ABC, I believe. So she does some incredible investigative work. But the other piece is a co-authored study by Nicola, who was our Chief Health Officer during the pandemic and still is. I think, is she the only one still around from the pandemic era? She's the only one silly enough not to quit, or maybe she can't find another job that pays as well, but she's still around. And what sickens me about this study is it's based around what they call nudge theory, which I would call coercion. Nudge is just another word for a coercive action. And it's targeting two at-risk groups. So you've got medically at-risk children, so children with, what have you got? Endocrine, cardiac, respiratory, gastrointestinal, musculoskeletal, and neurological conditions. And then you've also got another study running at the same time with pregnant women. They're targeting the most at risk. They're targeting them with a series of text messages and videos. And I read through the study a couple of times. The first video is, like, from memory, a medical specialist. The second video is from like a sick child or a parent trying to sort of apply some pressure. And the third video was another form of medical specialist from memory, but applying pressure through fear to at-risk or people who are going through something for the first time in their life. Like with our first child, we didn't know what we were doing. We were scared parents as well. Like, how are we going to look after this thing when it's born? And you can understand why these tactics might work. But probably the weirdest thing about it all was that it received ethics approval. I believe it's unethical to put this pressure out on at-risk people, but it received ethics approval and a waiver. So you don't actually have to provide consent. There is no consent. They just do this randomly. And then the people that participate don't ever know that they participated. The results come out and the government's like, yep, that works. Let's apply pressure to everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't agree.
Doesn't it?
Nudge units get big budgets and everything as well, don't they? By the way, I know this is off topic, but I just saw yesterday that Albo spent 400 million on that Voice to Parliament thing to lose it. I mean, what a total waste of money. Talk about nudging those posters. And they actually erected poles near me in the mountains in the southeast, like fresh poles, just to put these giant vote yes things on. Absolutely outrageous. I just wonder. My concern is that we don't have enough independent bodies, because there wouldn't be, right? And they wouldn't get grants from government. They wouldn't get any kind of funding there isn't anyone to investigate the government. So it's being left to us in the general public, isn't it, to look at all these documents and look at this analysis and realize it's not making sense. I mean, these people had the nerve during the pandemic to say to us, we must follow the data and the science. And now the data and the science is in, and we're seemingly no longer interested until, of course, they try and push the next pandemic, and then we'll suddenly be impressed with the data and the science again. So it's incredibly frustrating. And I don't know how these people can sleep at night, to be honest, Michael. I really don't.
Well, Nicola, the media is supposed to be that fourth arm of government, the fourth branch. You've got the legislative, the executive, the judicial, and then it is actually the media's job to expose the truth and hold them to account. But that's now becoming the alternate media very, very fast, and also citizen journalists. I don't love posting to social media, but I have to, because a lot of these things no one ever talks about or covers. And I'm privy to information, and I'm always reading sources that I know the general public will never see. So you've just got to get it out there and hope that it circulates and try and hold the government to account. And
do you try, Michael, do you try and send stuff to the ABC, to SBF, to Channel 9, Network 10 and say, why aren't you reporting on this?
Yeah, I even had the ABC issue a correction during the pandemic for incorrect data that they put out. So yeah, I do. When I see something that's wrong or patently false, I will send through, because they have journalistic standards they have to stand by. The trouble is, you know how media works. You don't have to be right anymore. You just have to be first. And once that story's run, you can't undo it. Whatever runs first becomes the truth in the populace, and it's really hard to undo that.
Wow. Well, there is certainly a change in sentiment, and you can generally measure it by those with higher profiles starting to talk out about it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you a clip out of Victoria, the fabulous Sam Newman with two other footy players there, Kevin Sheedy and Wayne Carey. Take a look.
What did you think about the government being sprung for not relying on the medical evidence about the Victorian government locking down the state for COVID? Nothing to do with medical advice. They just decided to lock it down. The most. I
would be very concerned when I did read that headline.
Yeah.
Surely every small business that's gone under, what sort of case would they have now to have a class action?
That will be
because
the science.
But the amount of businesses that have gone under, the amount of people that have gone. Well, I assume there'd be people that have gone homeless since.
Suicides, bankruptcies,
everything.
People not getting educated because of bloody-mindedness by the most dishonest and corrupt government ever in the history of the world. Didn't trust the science, just bloody-mindedly shut down the state.
Did you have the jabs?
Well, only because you couldn't go anywhere.
Did you have the jabs, Sheeds? So we all had them because we were bribed. You know what? We're bribed to have them. We're bribed. We're told you will not be able to work or you will not be able to do anything if you don't have the...
And it was all bogus. They trusted not the science. They just decided dictatorial government, just a disgrace.
Look, Jason, the only thing that these modern governments understand is commerce. Right. That's why they do so many things we don't agree with, sell our oil and gas and coal overseas. They only understand the language of money and commerce these days. So he's absolutely right there when he said the words class action lawsuit. Think about how many small businesses closed due to what has now been confirmed was not legitimate health advice. These people need to take out a massive class action against the government. And I mean, my husband and I both lost our jobs as well because we wouldn't inject it. So there's lost earnings for people who didn't have a business but lost jobs. And, Jason, and you and I have interviewed police officers who want to become police officers again, and they want their lost earnings because they were also taken off the job. And now we're told we don't have enough police. I mean, if the only language they understand is money, there's no empathy, there's no humanity, there's no regret, there's no conscience, then let's take them to the cleaners financially.
Well, Michael, if there's a way to do it, should they be doing it?
Totally. The trouble is it's going to be taxpayers that end up paying the compensation because that's how life works, unfortunately. But what really concerns me, so there is a phrase in politics that no one wins by yelling at the crowd. And we spend a lot of time yelling at the crowd. I really think the path to victory is to pick off the most egregious actions by individuals and make sure they're held to account for it. And I think Dan Andrews probably was one of those that abused his population the most. And something that really, really annoys me is the fact that he's landed on his feet and he's working with Twiggy Forrest now, selling green iron to China. Like, these guys always find a way to capitalize on the connections they've made through their profile in politics, unfortunately. But I say this a lot, but I think it's really important that we don't give up fighting for that Royal Commission. We really do need the Royal Commission to happen federally. And I don't think it's going to happen in the next 3 years. We still don't have the numbers in Parliament. But give it another maybe 6 to 9 years, those that are in Parliament, there'll be very few left from 2020. There'll be none left. So the guys in Parliament will no longer be protecting themselves, and they don't care about the previous generation. They're happy to throw them under the bus. So I think we're going to have to wait a while for a proper Royal Commission, but that doesn't mean that we stop applying pressure between now and then. We just have to keep trying. We've failed in the courts over and over again. We've only ever really won on technicalities, let's be honest. We haven't had that massive win yet, but we will get there because we know the truth is on our side, and we know these people acted and abused human rights. That's what they did.
Well, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to be able to, as you just confirmed for us, professionalize in many ways. Now, part of this movement, if you will, but it's more than that now. It's how we blend back in with the mainstream. And one such person who has been doing work since day one has been John Larter. And I just want to bring this up for people's attention. Here is John this week. He caught up with the Governor-General in Canberra and highlighted the lack of safety around mRNA jabs, those still suffering from mandates and vaccine injured. She agreed to look into it, and John says we need a Royal Commission. Now, that may well be lip service, but that shows real, genuine leadership from John Larter, who is already previously serving pre-COVID, was an elected mayor. He's on council again, and he's leading up the Allied Council of Australia. He's the president of that organisation. Of course, competes in makes club grubbery. There you go, get it out eventually with Hoodie. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a way to build on what we have here and to start to make inroads. It's not something that we're now nowhere to be seen. This is a big deal that John is able to meet up with the GG, but at the same time, the Governor-General is, her own thing. She's telling us pretty much she wants to be a republic. She's working with the government as opposed to working with the king in her role. It's an odd thing, but we got her attention. That's the point. Do you feel confident that we can continue and build on such a thing?
She's the most senior politician in Australia. Did you know that? Those words came out of Anthony Albanese's mouth at a presser a couple of years ago. The Governor-General is the most senior politician in Australia. So the general public believe they've got a Prime Minister and the Prime Minister makes all the decisions. But they don't. They're just the Scotty from marketing delivering all the bad news. I think John Larter would have been better off explaining all that to a head of lettuce. He's not going to get anything out of that Governor-General. And time will tell. I'd like to be proven wrong, but I don't think I will be.
Nicola, I'd love to be as cynical, but I think every time you get an opportunity to tell the truth to someone who's in a position of power, you take it. You just need to keep planting those seeds. And even if when she laid her head on the pillow that night, she thought about that conversation, that's a win. You just got to keep reminding them. We can't stop.
Yep. Okay, that's exactly. You've got to keep moving forward, don't you? As much as we can think that we're not going to get there. Now, look, I want to bring this up. This is Susan Lee this week. She went to the National Press Club and she delivered an acknowledgement of country. She supported the Safety Commissioner, and then she came out and said that she's prepared to be a zealot to get Liberal Party to pre-select more women as it happened. Well, on the left-hand side there, you can see Barclay McGain's commentary, which he only wrote last night. He said Opposition Leader Susan Lee fronted the National Press Club yesterday to say she is prepared to be a zealot for pre-selecting women in winnable seats. She inferred that a reason for the election loss was largely due to a lack of female candidates. So Barclay takes a look. By most metrics, a winnable seat is one that is within 5% of being won by the other party. So after the 22 election, this applied to 18 seats, and he names them. And for those 18 seats, we had 9 males and 9 females. So not only is Lee heralding illiberal solutions to the woman problem, inverted commas, of pre-selected candidates, but it is a problem that doesn't even exist in the first place. She was the opposition leader for the last 3 years, and instead of being introspective, she's footing the blame at the feet of grassroots members and saying that she wants females to far outnumber male candidates. Self-responsibility for the election loss and the idea of merit seem to be forgotten in her modern Australia. Barclay's suggestion is solving the woman problem might involve actually standing up for people like Moira Deeming, opposing the inclusion of biological males in women's sport, and suggesting that female candidates vying for pre-selection count far more than their gender. What are your thoughts on the opposition leader, Susan Lee's attitude?
I would say, instead of being a zealot for gender equality, how about you be a zealot for the Liberal Party's We Believe statement? That is a brilliant document that I wholeheartedly agree with. So if she commits fully to the We Believe statement and shaping policy around that, they'll govern again soon. But if they continue to depart the We Believe statement, they'll be in opposition for as long as we can see.
Again, that comment, zealot, I'm prepared to be a zealot. She's prepared to subvert people's democracy because the people of the country have made it very clear these things are not what they want. We're derided as for wanting to seek freedom and accountability, and she can go out there and she can say she's going to be a zealot, that she applauds the climate hoax, that she's on with DEI policy. I notice all these parties, the majors that are on with DEI policy, and they want people of colour at the front of the queue, and you can see in the jobs market that's absolutely happening. Why isn't it our people of colour? Why isn't it the Australian Indigenous people who are at the front of the queue for those jobs? No, it's the new Australians of colour, and everything's just lip service. And so, we get called conspiracy theorists, or we get derided and get slandered. I was slandered on the ABC for asking for accountability from government, and she's free to say a statement like that. I mean, these times are extraordinary.
I just can't understand how you can get so lost in the system that thinking that the way forward is to be like the people that beat you, that you were competing against, that somehow that there's anything to be gained in that. I like Matt Camanzoli's comments, Matt, who's been a guest on this show. I'll put them up on the screen for you now. Susan Lee's address is just the same old rehashed nonsense that they've spouted for 5 years now. Not listening, not learning, not an opposition. Their focus groups are cover for people who have no instinct, no idea, and hopeless. Well, Matt has been part of that party for some time, and when you lose good people like Matt Camanzoli from your party, if you have a brain drain, if you will, you can't expect to be as good as you were, Michael. That's the other problem here. They just, like when you just said earlier in the show, they let go Craig Kelly, Russell Broadbent, George Christensen. Of course, Jared Rennick wasn't put in a position where he could win from his third spot on pre-selection. I mean, there can't be those people that I just mentioned, all of whom were high performers. They might not agree with the hive-minded government attitude, but high performers nonetheless. You can't survive if you keep doing that, can you?
No, and we saw last election the Libs ran with a really small target campaign. There was no policy. It was really small target. It was like, we're not Albo, so give us a chance because we've got a slightly different way of achieving the same end, and that's not good enough. And what they're doing here is they're kind of doubling down on that. Like, I've played a fair bit of footy over my life, and if you're 5 goals down at 3/4 time, you don't go defensive. You just throw everything you've got at it, and you try and win. You'd rather lose by 10 goals than lose by a point. And it feels like they're just trying to lose by a point at the moment. Take some risks, have some fun, and present some vision. I think Aussies really just want to see leadership that's human and that's willing to take that risk of presenting an alternate vision that's big. Stop playing small.
Michael, they must understand in the Liberal Party that if they stepped forward, if you really care about public opinion, that if they stepped forward and said, we now consider DEI to be a racist policy, that's what I consider it to be, And we are going to drop our efforts to reach net zero because it's going to be very detrimental to the Australian population. And what difference can our tiny percentage make anyway, if you believe such things? Those types of efforts, and we'll look into the harms of mRNA, those kind of efforts would almost guarantee an election. So why don't they do it? Who's pulling their strings?
It's a great question. Or is it just the fact that they can't prosecute the argument? They don't want to do the work to be able to try and educate the people. Do they have the people that can do it? Have they got the politicians in there with the spine to hold the line? Because if you're going to come out with those propositions in the first year, you're going to get attacked pretty heavily from the legacy media and the opposition, whatever. So what? You've got to be able to wear the pain for a year to then see the fruit in years 2 and year 3, because it takes time to change the public perception of all of these issues. I get that. There's a mainstream line there with people that take minimal interest in politics, who believe just those one-liners they see on the front page of the paper. But over time, you can change that. They just have to commit to that longer-term plan. And
it would be like Trump, Michael. It would be like Trump. It would awaken the silent majority.
But Trump can sell that. Is Lay going to sell it? I don't think so. Unfortunately,
oh, no, she's not.
Yeah, correct. Matt Canavan could absolutely sell that. I love seeing Matt Canavan unchained a few weeks ago when he was running for leader of the Nationals. And what was his line? It was a ripper. The people that vote for the Nationals shower after work, not before work. That's the kind of leadership they need. Simple slogans that tell a big truth, right? Matt is the ultimate leader, I think, of the coalition right now. I think he shows the most promise. And I was disappointed to see Jacinta Price jump with the Libs, because I thought a Canavan-Price combo would have been amazing. Australia needs that, because they're both straight talkers. They both have different strong points. And what I like about Canavan is he can talk to most issues. He's across it. He does the work.
But so can you. Why can't you go into the lower house and then you can be PM later on? What's going on, Michael?
I've got to get pro-selected into a winnable seat, Nicola. And one of the reasons I didn't run last time, we had some personal health issues happening with my daughter, which thank God they're all sorted now. But also, I don't want to waste my volunteers' time. If I'm going to run, I'm going to run with a good chance of winning and absolutely commit to it and devote 12 months of my life, no work, let's campaign, let's win. And I didn't see that opportunity there last time, but into the future there will be. It's just making sure that you make it work. And personally, the more work I can do, the more I can learn, the better you can be at the job too. So it's just waiting for that right moment and then committing 100% to it. Yeah.
I think you are a star in waiting, Michael. I really do. I think a lot of people would get behind you.
Thanks, Nicola.
Well, I love the encouragement, and obviously we want to see you, Michael, and lots of others with your ability to do the same. So the next question here, therefore, goes towards organising in political perspectives, whether or not we need to be running third party and multiple third parties, or whether or not the qualified people need to work a way to get back into the mainstream / inverted commas conservative side of politics, whether they join the Nationals or whether they join the Liberals. The problem, of course, is that the Liberals have discarded, so many of their stars. It feels like that they're still not there yet. However, if 5,000 people, for example, were to go and join both parties from the third party movement and then put up who they think would be their best people to make progress, wouldn't that in a way be a wave of new ideas? I know people have got frustrated, me one of them, and a fellow I met the other day was the same. I met a fellow who was a former Labor councillor in Sydney who walked away from the party, and we compared notes, but he was nowhere where I was politically. But we were both told the same thing: try and change the party from within, realizing that was impossible. So I'm wondering if I'm asking a self-defeating question in the first place, but surely this is a numbers game. And if thousands of people were to move into these mainstream parties, could we therefore influence the change at a rank and file level then?
There's two ways this can play out, right? So you either have the strategy of cancelling out the Australian Greens and gaining upper house support. So that could potentially work via either funneling the minor right-wing votes into one party, or finding a way to work together and maybe having pre-selecting the best candidate in each state and backing them and making sure they get into the upper house, because the number of votes that minor right-wing parties get is sufficient to match the Greens in federal parliament. We should have 12 senators. That's the truth. There's enough vote there for it. We now have 4 One Nation senators plus Senator Babbitt. So we've got 5. We should have 12. And if we had 12, Labor would not have passage of bills through the Senate. They would need us or the Liberal Party and Nationals to support a bill to get something across the line. But unfortunately, they've got the Greens, and the Greens plus them is enough right now. So that's one way. That would require somewhat of dying to ourselves and making sure that we have a very transparent branch-based process and proper pre-selections with maybe a grand round where you do debate and you genuinely democratically vote in your candidates and make sure they're pre-selected properly. The other option to talk about is backing the major parties. I too am a former Liberal Party member. I used to be a treasurer of my local branch until 2021 when I decided I've had enough, and I had to run for parliament because I didn't see that things were going to change unless we really had a crack. So I was like, well, sorry, wife, I'm going to do it now. It's a bit early, but let's have a go. Alex Antic's done a pretty good job in South Australia. I'll give him that. He's gained sufficient numbers. His side of the party is pre-selecting most candidates now. He's got another senator in Leah Blythe. She replaced Simon Birmingham in the Senate, so that's another tick. We've got 2 good Liberal senators from South Australia now. The trouble is they're going to get absolutely obliterated at the next state election. So the big test for the Liberal Party will be after next March, whether the Liberal Party can continue on and Alex can hold the line and he has enough support behind him to push to then see the good side, because you've got to have pain to affect change, and they're going to have serious pain next March. So if the membership can hold the line, they ran Daniel Wild from the IPA last time. I'm not sure if you know Daniel. He's a brilliant candidate. They're running some really good people. It's just a matter of holding the line to the point where you actually start to see the fruits of your labour. And that's a little way away yet. So look, the jury's still out. I would just encourage anyone watching today, I don't really care which plan you run with, just get involved. Stop being a keyboard warrior. Actually join a party. No party's perfect. They all have their problems, trust me. And on the right, the liberal/conservative side of politics, we choose to die on hills that aren't worth dying on. Look at the left, look at the Greens. They don't all agree on every issue, but they find a way that what's that phrase? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. We need to make sure that we make friends with the enemies of our enemies in order to get elected, to be able to affect meaningful change, because we agree on most things. And we sometimes find a way of destroying everything over not much of a disagreement at all. And we've got to stop doing that.
Yeah, because life is
so
getting
important.
slowly worse. That's what's happening. They're making it incrementally worse as time goes on. So they're not fit for purpose. They're just not. They're not doing a great job.
You made reference to the state South Australian election. I'm going to put up a graphic here. Take a look at this on the right-hand side. South Australia poised for a record-breaking 67% of two-party preferred vote. That's Michael's hometown. And on the right-hand side is a photograph of Zoran Mamdani, the new Democrat pre-selected primary winner there for Mayor of New York. The question being, can socialism provide economic solutions as the left solidifies more power? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you a clip of this particular nominee for New York mayor. This is him talking about what his solutions were when he went out on the hustings.
I think it is part of a larger referendum on where our party goes. And I think one of the hopes that we had from the very beginning of this campaign was to move our political instinct from lecturing to listening. You know, at the national level, after the presidential election, we saw that New York was actually the state with the largest swing in the country towards Donald Trump, 11.5 points, and that swing took place far from the caricature of Trump voters, instead taking place in the hearts of immigrant New York City. And I went to those neighborhoods. I went to Fordham Road in the Bronx and Hillside Avenue in Queens, and I asked those New Yorkers, the vast majority of whom were Democrats, why they voted for Trump and what it would take to bring them back to the Democratic Party. And again, what I heard from them was cost of living, was an inability to afford the very things they recalled being able to purchase 4 years ago. And when they told me what it would take, they said again and again, a relentless focus on an economic agenda. And ultimately, in listening to them, we built a campaign that was explicitly about making this city affordable.
My point there is that this man is a democratic socialist. He advocates for free bus rides. He advocates for all sorts of free stuff, and he even advocates for wholesale pricing on groceries by taking over the purchasing, therefore, of various different outlets. And all of this must be funded by the taxpayer. At what part, when did socialism become the answer, Michael, for economic problems and cost of living crises?
Incrementally is the answer. Over time, the Australian people have become more and more reliant on government for employment, for all sorts of things. Look at, energy bill rebates, look at first homeowners grants, like layer upon layer upon layer of government support. And eventually, when we have a problem now, we just turn to daddy government and say, hey, can you provide us with another Band-Aid that's going to make it worse long term, but make us feel a little bit warm and fuzzy in the short term? And if we keep doing this, we continue to become more and more reliant on government. In South Australia, as you mentioned, Peter Malinauskas, or Propaganda Pete, as I like to call him, is perhaps maybe the most popular premier in all of Australia. His game plan is really simple. So as soon as he was elected as premier, he hired Nick Harmson, who was the most senior ABC journalist, as his PR guy. He's really good at marketing. He's brought Live Golf. He's brought Gather Round for the AFL. He's brought V8 car race in December. He went and met with, I think it was Taylor Swift, to get her to perform a concert in South Australia. So he's really good at the bread and circuses stuff. But meanwhile, our electricity is, 80 or 90%, 80% more expensive than Victoria now. And we're committed to net zero electricity generation by 2027, which, if you look at physics, it just can't happen. What he really means is we're going to produce a ton of solar and wind power, but when it's dark and not windy, we're going to be importing coal-fired power from Victoria. And as we are overnight now, we've actually fired up the diesel generators to keep the lights on. We're going to have a lot more of that. So we're burning diesel to fuel the lie.
It's all big government.
The way you make green energy.
It's just big government against small government. I'm for small government. Like, get out of my life. Leave me alone. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I don't need you to help me get on my feet. It's that thing you say, Jason, about self-sufficiency. We need to push an agenda with a conservative Australian party about self-sufficiency and not leaning on government for every little thing. Because when you lean on government for every little thing, that every little thing begins to come with caveats like, how many injections have you had? Let's see if you qualify.
Just extraordinary, isn't it? But to think that that the best way to get ahead with green energy is to not use it is not the answer, of course, which is what you were asked to do in that particular message that you received there, Michael. It's just mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yep, AGL sent me a message midday. They knew the wind wasn't blowing and that it was going to be dark again at night. Surprise, surprise. And they're like, hey, if you use a bit less electricity tonight, we'll give you a $5 bill credit. And it's an actual thing. They're messaging people regularly when they think there's going to be some issues with supply of electricity. And obviously not enough people chose to use less electricity. So they fired up those diesel generators just to keep us going.
Unreal.
They have
unreal.
diesel generator. There's a machine near me. That is a can recycling plant. It's in a Mitre 10 car park. And at the back, it's got a diesel generator that operates. I mean, this has got to stop. How stupid do they think we are? It's got to stop. And in England, you said earlier, Michael, that I lit the fire. I like to light the fire too. In England, they even tried to say that you wouldn't, if you had to turn the heating off because you didn't get your winter fuel allowance, you weren't allowed to light a fire because those logs, that wood, was creating carbon, and you would get a massive fine, and they'd see the smoke from your house and you'd get a knock on the door from the British government. You cannot back us into a corner where you say to save the planet, you're going to destroy our lives based on junk science that all of the true environmentalists have proved isn't correct. And I'm embarrassed for these people when they stand in front of us and say this stuff, and this is the answer, and we've got to get to net zero. The only way we're going to get to net zero in Australia is if all the people are gone for whatever reason, and it's just a big red rock again, then you'll be at your net zero. And then what are these corporations going to do? The big corporations like to rip us off. What are the banks going to do when they want you to get loans and mortgages and pay high interest rates when all their customers are gone? People are fleeing this country. Between 70 and 80,000 Australians a month are leaving this country, and I'm begging them not to go. All my billionaire friends, I've only got a few, bastards, they've all left. They've gone to the south of France. One even went to Las Vegas. Imagine swapping Melbourne for Las Vegas, because they just can't take it here anymore. And what to change? I understand what they've done. It's this big government. The government is feeding off its own. It's feeding off Australians, but we've got nothing left down here on the ground in the 99%. So there's going to have to be a reset after the reset, where you at least let people exist and have a life.
And you know what the solution is, Nicola? Politically, leadership of the opposition has to start making government the scapegoat for the big issues that we face, especially housing affordability. Like it's what I know best. But the housing market has been completely pumped by government intervention over and over again. And I think the young people, those that are 18 to 30 who can't afford a house, they're looking to government as a savior, but we need to flip the script and prove to them that actually it is government that has caused this problem. And every additional government intervention is actually going to make it worse for you and your children. And people in my age, 30 to 40 years old, we need to think about our children and understand once again that it is government that is the cause, not the solution to this problem. Like the average affordability of a house in Australia is twice as expensive as the USA. We should be the same, but our government is so addicted to perpetual housing price growth that they will throw anything they can at it to keep this Ponzi scheme going.
You just said Ponzi scheme there, and you're explaining the idea that that you're throwing money in the back door to keep it, through the front to keep it propped up at the back. And one such example is the government sort of co-ownership scheme there. Can you provide an update? Has that got off the ground? Is there anyone actually signing up for it? They said originally it was going to be 10,000 homes. What's the reality behind it at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know how many have taken it up yet. I know it was a federal scheme that was announced whereby for an existing home, you could go part owner with the government. They could buy 30% of your new house and you can buy 70% of it, which really all that means is that you can pay 30% more for a house because your borrowing capacity remains the same. So if you're at a $700,000 or $800,000 house, all of a sudden you're looking at $1 million home and you're going to own 70% of that. But what people don't realize is that you own 70%, but you pay 100% of the council rates. You pay 100% of any repairs and maintenance on that property. You pay 100% of the granny flat you install or an extra bedroom you put on that house. And then when you sell it, the taxpayer clips 30% of what you sell of that improved asset. But also, I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey in the US and his financial advice. And what Ramsey always says is that when you borrow money from family, for example, dinner tastes like a family dinner tastes a little bit different. And when you're buying your house with the government, I think the same effect is there. You're no longer just slave to the bank, but you're also slave to daddy government. And there's that subliminal thing there that you don't actually really own this. You're sort of just borrowing it. And it's not the same as owning outright. I would urge all young people to lower your eyes, buy something you can afford and try and clear your debt quickly, because having no debt on your own house is the ultimate form of liberation in your life. If you're a slave to debt, you're going to have to comply with whatever is thrown at you.
This is the thing, isn't it? This is what the whole pandemic era was all about, was coercion based on the fact that you were part of the rat race. You even saw 3 highly successful AFL players, all who should have been financially self-sufficient in their own right, all admitting that they took the jab generally under coercion because they had to do whatever they needed to do. So if those guys at that level, meant to be the tough, robust footballers, were just falling into line, what do we expect the general public to do in those circumstances but to fall at the same way? So therefore, those that did stand up to it, and there are those of us here in front of the camera delivering a message to those behind the camera who are as equally as resilient and as tough and maybe just stubborn to be able to realise that there is a price or a line in the sand that they would not cross. But at the same time, we are in this area, a silo, whatever it is, and we are trying desperately here at the Daily Australian to make a product to reach the mainstream. But are we just a different type of person, and therefore we are living in a parallel life now in Australia, as sad as that sounds? But should we therefore, and this is probably what's been going through people's minds for so long, setting up almost a separate community? That's kind of how we've coped over the last 5 years. But that doesn't seem to be the answer going forward here, because Anthony Albanese cannot be the epitome of leadership and someone that is commanding. Like John Howard, whether you liked him or not, seemed to be commanding. Bob Hawke was, commanding. Menzies, commanding. Albanese, not. And at the same time, as we just saw this whole situation with Iran and Israel and et cetera fairly being put to sleep, expecting now that Putin's going to man up and sort out Ukraine. What did we hear yesterday? Albo, he's sending troops, Australian troops, to Ukraine. If you can believe that at this late stage in the game. What is this man thinking? Or is he just a globalist trying to score more points and somehow he's going to wait out Trump in office for 3 more years? What's going through this man's head?
He's just a friendly socialist who's just announced essentially that Australia's at war with Russia. Why would Australia be at war with Russia? It's appalling. He's not making the decisions for this country. And I have so many questions about how this works. I mean, he must have got his marching orders from the UK is the only thing I can think. I really hope it's not from Brussels, because all this feels like foreign interference in Australian democracy, foreign interference. The way Australians on the ground feel about Anthony Albanese doing that, I think it's 1 plane and 100 Australian Defence Force soldiers, is the way most Americans felt about the Vietnam War. We're not accepting of it. We don't support it. It's like hashtag not in my name. It's truly awful.
No, I agree, Nicola.
Michael,
we have no
think?
business in engaging in that at all. We have no business there whatsoever. And this is one of the reasons why I'm going to really miss Rennick in the Senate, because Rennick is one of those who, especially on geopolitical issues, he's done the work and he's not scared to stand up and speak about it. I'm not across it as well as Rennick is, I'll admit that. But I really admire his ability to dig and to find to discern where the truth really lies in these issues. But the bottom line is, you're right, Nicola, if you put this to a referendum or to a plebiscite, 90-something%, I would assume, of Australians would say, hell no, no troops, stop it, focus on us. We can't afford a roof over our head. Let's fix our own backyard before we start throwing more money at something that we're not going to affect the outcome of, or we have no involvement in.
There's no real conversations between Australian leadership and the Australian people. There's no transparency. There's no accountability. So it's like Australians vote people in. They vote in their prime minister, if you believe such a thing. And then off he trots to Brussels to get his marching orders. I mean, this is international foreign interference in Australian democracy, which is a massive crime. But there's no one to investigate it because it's the government.
Frustrating, isn't it, when you have a globalist regime on both sides, Labor and Liberal, it seems, content on signing up by definition to the WHO and subcontracting out our part of our health controls there to that private organisation. The same can be said for if and when they head out to the World Economic Forum, or of course when you mention Brussels, European Parliament, NATO, etc. Makes no sense. Meanwhile, when all this is said and done, Albo's out again. This headline popped up as well only a couple of days ago. Vindictive and nasty. Albanese slashes Liberals' staff budget. He's been accused of breaking a tradition with a move that has been blasted as vindictive and nasty to cut staffing levels of senior Liberal shadow ministers and staffers. Does that affect you in your office as well, or could it?
Yeah, it very, very much so, Jason. So we've received contact this week that there is going to be changes to our staffing. Thanks, Mr. Albanese. I appreciate that. We're working through it. I'm more than happy to just work part-time or whatever we have to do to make it work. It's okay. But, this is, what did Albo promise when he came into power? It was a kinder, gentler brand of Australian politics, but here he is sort of picking winners and deciding that those political opponents get less staff as opposed to those that he really likes. It's pretty wild. You would think that staffing would be equally allocated, but then I think of it objectively myself. I'm more than happy for cuts to the public service. I think it's pretty bloated, but when it's your own job, you're like, oh, well, if it has to be me, so be it. But I think One Nation's put a statement out on this. They're pretty angry. Pauline said that they've gained 2 extra senators, but they're only going to have the same number of staff they had when they had 2 senators. So now they've got 4. So they're going to be spread quite thinly as well. And I can tell you for a fact, so we have 2 personal staff for Senator Babbitt, myself and one other. Well, we had 2. I'm not sure what we're going to have next week. We'll wait and see. But when you're in Parliament, sometimes you get hit with 30, 40, 50 bills in a week that are coming through, and they'll pass a guillotine motion. And a lot of my time is just spent reading bills and deciding which way to vote, how to draft a quick amendment, and often these bills pass without any debate at all allowed. Guillotine motion means that they put the question on the bills, and the best thing about political debate is you have the opportunity, even if the bill's going to pass, to put on the record your dissent, to expose for a future judge who may be making a call on a piece of legislation in a court to say, hey, look, well, at the time the senator did query this issue. And they can make a sort of discerning choice. But if you don't have the opportunity to put anything on the record, there is nothing. The bill passes, on the voices because there's no opposition that's material, and it's over. It's law, and there's no record ever of any dissent, which is wild. And the more you reduce crossbench staff levels, the less ability those crossbench senators are going to have to really dig through the details and work out where the devil lies.
Well, that doesn't bode well. That shows that they're going to do their classic thing of bringing things in like the digital identity bill, slam it through. There's no debate. It's a devious hobbling of anyone that could interrupt your agenda.
Mm-hmm. And what I can tell you about Labor when they're in government is they govern. So if they promise to do something, they'll do that plus a whole bunch more. But they are pretty bold and they do push the legislation through. And I think previous Liberal Party governments were probably a little bit too kind. They didn't repeal anything. They maybe added a few layers here and there, but the next Conservative government that gets into power needs to be a government that has a reform agenda and a repeal agenda to actually rid Australia of all of this disgusting layer upon layer of legislation, because an omnibus repeal bill is what I would love to see come through the Parliament one day, where all the junk is wiped, because there are so many bills that have passed that really haven't done a lot, but create a whole bunch of unintended consequences.
If Labor were to get their way, I just wanted to ask Michael quickly before we go, if Labor were to get their way, if there was no one to stand in between, no one to stop legislations, no one to stop them pushing anything through, what does the end Australia, the end goal look like, do you think, Michael, if we're not successful in any way?
I foresee nothing super adverse immediately, but what I do worry about, Nicola, is a next emergency, whatever that emergency might be, because we know that governments, they're human. They're not going to behave ridiculously for no reason. But if there is an emergency and they believe it is an emergency, a health or whatever it might be, a war, we've now legislated all sorts of powers, all sorts of centralized powers that can be abused for health reasons, all sorts of reasons, economically, whatever. And all of those powers can be used into the future if they're not capped. So I'm not so worried about tomorrow as I am the more distant future when there is an emergency that needs to be acted upon, because free speech will be our first victim. There are so many layers of legislation at a state and federal level now that allow them to limit what we say and to censor what we say. And if you can't talk, you can't communicate, well, you can't prosecute an alternate argument, can you? And it's all one-way traffic. So speech, I think, would be the first victim.
And I've got one quick question, Jason. My last question to Michael. Yes or no answer. is there even the slightest chance moving forward through this Labour administration that Australia could experience bank bail-ins?
Yes, there is always a chance, right, Nicola? I had to think about that. But no, they're that economically illiterate that, and I do know that whether they have the power or not right now, in a crisis, they can force legislation through the parliament within a day. We've seen them do it before. So even if they, and a lot of politics is just bluff. They sometimes don't have the full power, but who holds them to account? The courts. And does it ever happen? Not very often, right? So there is a chance. I don't think it's a risk materially right now. Economically, Australia, believe it or not, is far better off from a government perspective than a lot of other nations. America's a basket case. Our debt levels aren't that silly, but the problem in Australia is actually more so consumer debt levels. Our people are burdened with far more debt than most other nations, and that's a big problem.
Thank you.
Now, Michael, 3 years into your role working with Senator Babet, how much do you reckon you've learnt on the job as opposed to learnt prior in percentage terms, do you think?
Yeah, one of the coolest things is none of our staff have ever worked in politics before. So we've got hairdressers and finance people and real estate agents and ex-Defence Force personnel. So we're all from all walks of life. And one of the coolest things is that we don't have that mindset that the political class have. So we see everything from a normie perspective, I guess. And I think that's great. But what I have learned is how stupid government is, let's be brutally honest, and how they're just human. And they're no smarter or wiser than you and I. And often they're dumber because they live in an echo chamber surrounded by yes men who just affirm their position on anything and don't challenge it. But one of the things I do respect about Ralph is that I challenge him regularly. That's my job, is say, I don't agree with that. I think that's about, and he doesn't sack me because of that. And I think some of those little men that are in Parliament probably would sack their staff who challenge them. So I do respect that. And I think for politics to survive long term, if you ever do have the privilege of being a politician, you've got to hire some people with completely different perspectives to you, because it's good to be challenged every day. If they're affirming your position and kissing your butt, you're not going to make good decisions. So, yeah.
It's really important that you mention that, because there will be people who will watch this and will consider if they should put their hand up and, as you said earlier, just to join a party, and one day that'll be to put your hand up and challenge for pre-selection for a given seat, and one day to eventually be elected to office, but not to be afraid that it is beyond you. On the contrary, this is meant to be the people's house, of which we are. The problem that we've had all along, as George Christensen wrote recently, was that government is not there to instruct us. They are there to listen to us and to serve us. And I think that's the big difference. Michael, what you've done is, of course, is that you are in a role where you are serving the people through ways of being just one of us out there, realizing that there is a whole bunch of bluff, like you said. They are not as good as they think they are, but they are very capable of using the system, in other words, to maintain power, simply because it's better to have it than to not if you are that way inclined. And so we need more Michael Arbons, not less, and we need more people like the rest of you that are watching and listening today to realise that Michael is just one of us, and you can too, and it makes all the difference. So you motivate us, you inspire us, and you show that we can lead ourselves. And I am forever grateful for, first of all, working with you in the campaigns back in 22 and along the way, and seeing you thriving. And hopefully Albo's not going to take away the hours, but even if he does, Michael, you'll still be working in a shorter or lesser capacity, serving out at least the next 3 years, or to a double dissolution or an early election. But more power to you, and thanks for your time today on the show.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Nicola. Keep up your great work.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think you are definitely one to watch. I shall be watching you with keen eyes as your career progresses, Michael. I think it's going to be a massive one. Thank you so much for tuning in again today to the Daily Australian with myself, Nicola Charles, my co-host Jason Olbourne, and Michael Arbon, who you may not have heard of before, but it's good to know that people like him are working in the background on our behalf. We will do this all over again on Monday. So have a fantastic weekend. For those who are Substack subscribers, later today we'll be filming TDA Unchained. The gloves will be off. The blue words will be flying around. Join us then if you're a subscriber. Have a fantastic weekend. See you Monday.